this point, Russia began significant operations in Syria in late September. They had multiple incursions into Turkish airspace, September, October, and early November, and then in late November, Turkey shot down one of Russia's aircraft. Do you know how many times Russia has invaded Turkish airspace since that shoot down?
I have no idea. I suspect they have not.
What do you think that says about the connection between those two events and their willingness to respect a demonstration of force in enforcing airspace rights?
Yes, I mean, the pattern of the Russians is exactly what we see in that situation. Turkey was protecting their sovereign airspace. They took what they thought was reasonable action to do that, and the Russians have stayed away from it. And I think that would be the same situation dealing with a no-fly zone. Listen, the Russians at the end of the day are not fools. They're practical. They're in Syria for one reason only, to prop up the Assad regime. They have a very limited military objective. That is their goal. I cannot see them extending that to bomb a place where we're trying to protect innocent people.
Ambassador Crocker, would you agree with that assessment?
I would, sir, and I'd extend it, of course, to Iran, that Russia and Iran in alliance are going to push in Syria and elsewhere, at least in the case of Iran, until somebody like us pushes back.
And if we could stick with Turkey for a moment, since they are in many ways the linchpin of both what's happening in Syria and our efforts there, as well as the refugee flows. At this moment, based on their past conduct, how would you assess that the Turkish government prioritizes the various fights they're engaged in, the Kurds, the Assad regime, and the Islamic State?
That's a great question, Senator, because it highlights something that we've been talking about this morning. We want the non-jihadi Syrian groups to fight Islamic State. Their archenemy isn't the Islamic State, it's Assad. We want the Arab states to come in to fight Islamic State. That's not their biggest issue, it's Iran. And the same thing applies with Turkey. Islamic State is clearly a threat to them, and they know it. We've seen the attacks into Syria. But in Ankara's calculus, the Kurds are a much greater threat. So we've got the dilemma that the most effective on-the-ground force we have found in Syria is the one that the Turks fear the most, particularly since the Syrian Kurdish groups, the YPG, are affiliated with the PKK. And, you know, thousands have died in that conflict inside of Turkey, both Kurds and Turks. So this is the problem from hell at every dimension. It isn't going to get better on its own. Startling revelation, I know. It's going to take that kind of sustained dialogue and engagement with all of our traditional allies in that area. We just need to be having that conversation.
Continuing on priorities, which Sunni Arab state views the Islamic State as a graver threat than it views Iran and Shiite aggression in the region?
I am not totally current on this. I would say, based on my last interactions, and of course King Abdullah was just here, some of you may have had that conversation with him, I think King Abdullah would put Islamic State up there ahead of Iran. The Arabian Peninsula states, no, it would be Iran. We didn't get much notice, but the Kuwaitis made some arrests in the last week or so of individuals accused in a massive terror plot involving literally tons of explosives that they trace to Iran. So for them, it's an existential threat. And in Iraq, he is in no position to say so, but I would bet that sandwiched between ISIS and Iran, the Iraqi leadership would probably put them on pretty much a par.
Well, my time has expired, but Mr. Gordon, I infer from your head nodding that you largely agree with Ambassador Crocker's assessment. Do you care to add any perspective?
I agree with his assessment. I think the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq would all say ISIS is a greater threat. Saudi Arabia would be focused on Iran.
Okay. Thank you all, gentlemen.